Well, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday I picked on the DA, and today I'm going to pick on the MK party because the MK party appears to be engaging in, well, what can only be described as modern slavery. And you know, the West has been accused of slavery for centuries. I want us to ask the question as to what reparations the MK party will pay for their role in potential slavery. But before we get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Right, guys, so we really need to talk about this because obviously the MK party holds itself out to be the vanguard of the poor and the helpless. Well, news out is that South Africans and Botswanan teenagers have all been lured into Russia. They've been told that they would receive VIP or bodyguard training and that they would later work for Jacob Zuma's MK party. Now, what exactly they were going to do in this party? Don't know. But what we can say is that the MK party seem to have got their votes on a ticket of, well, we go after the young unemployed teenager. And now we have a good idea of what the young unemployed teenager will be doing with their time, because when they were shipped to Russia, rather than going to get this training, they were actually shipped into the Ukrainian war zone, and they were deployed near Donetsk, 10 kilometers from the front line. Now, they were turned into Russian soldiers, often without understanding that the contracts that they signed had committed them to effectively be mercenaries. Now, we've seen numerous instances where individuals make aliyah to Israel and then they can never return to South Africa on fear of war crimes. And one has to ask the question as to whether or not these individuals are going to be held accountable for, well, war crimes, because it's a war. Now, families of these soldiers are accusing the Zuma family and other such individuals of human trafficking, fraud, and illegal military recruitment. Now, when we've heard about it again in relation to Israel, we understand that it is a violation going on here of numerous local legislation. So is this also a violation of it? Or is this selective justice, of which we've seen numerous times? Now, these men say that they were sold to the Russians and that they are powerless and they are being left to die. And that's an allusion to the fact that these soldiers often, well, they get killed in action because it's a war zone. Now, the scandal threatens South Africa's reputation at a time when Ramaphosa is trying to lead Africa on the world stage. He's just had the G20. This is a massive scandal in the making. So let's actually have a look how it actually all went down. So the news is that the recruitment worked as follows. So recruiters linked to the MK party promised bodyguard and VIP training. They promised good jobs in South Africa after the training and a shared struggle with Dudu Zuma. Now, Dudu Zuma strengthened this so-called trust that they would be looked after by joining their WhatsApp groups and sending cheerful messages, sharing training pictures, selfies, and videos, and promising to stay in Russia with them for a year. So she's apparently the person who's engaged in the sale of these individuals. Now, when the men actually arrived in Russia, they were pressured to sign a Russian-only contract. So no translations were provided. And they say they don't really know what they signed. They were told that the forms were just admin. And that signing the contracts effectively turned them into Russian military personnel, effectively locking them into the state to work on behalf of Russia. Now, these men have described what the reality of their lived experience is. They say that there's heavy artillery, drones, and explosions like all day long. They say that they sleep in abandoned buildings and forests, and they carry Russian weapons, saying that they themselves are moved in trucks to unknown destinations like all the time. They said that there are minefields, lost limbs, and disappearing comrades like everywhere. Now, one live interview captured a drone strike explosion in the background, so that gives credence to what they're saying. They're saying their conditions there are pretty brutal. They say they have limited medical help, they have winter conditions, and they have a fear that they are never coming home. Now, one said that it's like a movie, it's not child's play, and another said, we guess we'll see you on the other side, alluding to the fact that they thought they're never actually going home, that they're going to die there. Now, the same thing effectively happened to two Botswanan teenagers aged 19 and 20 who traveled with the South African group. Now, they believed that they were going over for an educational program. And after arrival, they were removed from the group, sent on a combat assignment, and disappeared. never heard from again for the next 3 months. Now, one left a note saying, "We've been taken away. I guess I'll see you on the other side." And their families in Botswana say that they never trusted Dudu, and they say that no one will help them now. Now, in relation to the actual WhatsApp group, now this WhatsApp group was created by Dudu Zuma and was originally called the Johannesburg Russia Team, but was later renamed to the MK Russia Mission. Now, early texts from Dudu said, "Relax, guys, welcome to Russia. Send photos for the commander. You're safe. Russians are just being Russians." And after the deployment, the men begged for help and told Dudu, "We are powerless. These guys can do whatever they want." Their phones were confiscated and their accounts were frozen. And they later realized that Dudu had left the Russian group breaking her promise. So she sent them to Russia and just like, that was it. Didn't give a damn. Now, it was at the moment that Dudu left the group that the men said they felt completely abandoned. Now, back at home, one of the Zuma daughters are actually filing a criminal charge against their half-sister, Dudu Zuma. And the charges are now including human trafficking, fraud, and contraventional foreign military assistance laws. Now, according to Dudu, she filed a counter-charge saying that actually it was one of the other individuals who are responsible. And she says that she's being politically targeted. Yeah, it's always like that, right? I mean, whenever you hold these individuals accountable, it's always like political motivations. Now, the Hawks confirm they've got multiple dockets for this, and they're all being investigated jointly. But the Zuma family is now publicly at war over who sent these men to the front line. Now, Jacob Zuma himself actually wrote a 2-page letter to the Russian defense minister, and Zuma asked Russia to withdraw the men from combat and move them to a safe location. Now, Zuma himself admits the men were misled by a former South African soldier to Russia, and obviously now it's not the Zuma family that did it, a former Russian soldier that no one knows of, and that their deaths would be a devastating loss, and that this could damage the Russian-African relations, he said. So even Zuma acknowledges that they weren't meant to actually be in the war. So the question remains, who the hell sold them to the Russians? Now, the MK party's official spokesperson downplayed the entire story, saying, "Why the fuss?" and claims that many Africans fight for Russia. He suggests that this is all part of misinformation and digital interference, and also admits that the men did travel via Dudu and that they believed they were going to train as bodyguards. And he says this is not an MK issue, it's a global issue. You see the accountability here? Like, there's zero accountability here. So the men are constantly messaging journalists and families. They say, "We are going to war. There are 50 of us in this truck. We don't know." Families in South Africa and Botswana said that the government help is slow. They said that there's no clear repatriation plan. And the Hawks and Durko are sympathetic but ineffective so far. I mean, they're all like, "Yeah, we're terribly sorry for your plight, but what do you want us to do?" Their phones keep getting confiscated. So they're trying to communicate with individuals, but they can't. Now, some wives and mothers have had no contact from these individuals for months. We're raising questions on how many of them are still actually alive. Now, this entire scandal is occurring as South Africa attends the 7th African Union and EU summit in Angola. Now, the whole key themes of that summit are meant to be peace and security, governance, migration and mobility, and Africa's global status. Now, the Angola president actually pushed for debt relief and financial systems reforms, pretty much similar to what Cyril was saying when he had the G20. But everybody at the actual summit is raising the same issue, and that is corruption and instability in Africa. And now the Russian recruitment scandal in South Africa. They all signal a risk, that Africa is a risk. It is not an easy place to deal with. Now, South Africa had hoped to present itself as a continental leader. But the world is now asking, how did an entire group of South Africans end up fighting for Russia? Because these individuals appear to have been subjected to modern slavery. They have been sold to the Russian system. And all indications, according to the news, allegedly, is that a lot of this had the blessing, or at least the figurehead, of Dudu Zuma. She was the one who was basically encouraging everybody. It was her personality and her position and her proximity to Jacob Zuma, that meant many of these individuals trusted that the mission would be what they said or what they were sold. But it wasn't, and they all landed up on the front lines fighting a foreign war. Now, many of you will say, well, serves them right. You muck around with the MK party, and this is what will tend to happen to you. And to you, I say, yeah, you're probably right. That does serve them right. But it's still a very terrible situation to be in. And really, we can't justify the destruction of lives simply for political point scoring. And so we have to look at the MK party and say, is nobody holding these individuals accountable yet again? Well, let me know what you think of that in the comments section below. Until next time, bye.